There were no scripts. No suits smoothing words for comfort. Just the raw heat of truth, and one man standing tall beneath a sea of flashing lights. Ibrahim Traoré faced the cameras. His voice didn't rise in anger. It didn't need to. It cut through silence like a blade. He spoke to more than Netanyahu. He spoke to every nation that ever treated Africa like a resource pit, a charity case, or a threat needing to be managed. We are not your colony. The room froze. The weight of the words didn't need repeating. We are not your pawns. This wasn't political theater. It was personal. Every syllable carried generations of betrayal, struggle, and stolen futures. He wasn't asking for recognition. He was claiming it. He named names. Tel Aviv. Washington. Paris. The cities where decisions are made in boardrooms about how African lives are shaped, without ever setting foot on the soil they exploit. Burkina Faso answers to no one but its people. Not one official dared to interrupt. The world had seen African leaders play the role of quiet partner. This was different. He wasn't trying to be liked. He wasn't there for applause. He was there to remind the world of something they had tried to erase, Africa's dignity. And then came the blow that echoed far beyond borders. If you threaten one of us, you threaten all of us. It wasn't just Burkina Faso anymore. It was Mali, Niger, Guinea, the whole Sahel. It was a continent finally finding its voice. And in that moment, it wasn't just Traoré speaking. It was Africa, roaring back. The speech was barely an hour old before it began spreading. Clipped, translated, shared. On WhatsApp groups in Ghana. Telegram channels in Sudan. TikToks in Congo. The message didn't stay behind podiums. It flooded streets, homes, and hearts. Traoré's voice, once just Burkina Faso's, became a cry across a continent that had waited too long to be heard. In Mali, Colonel Assimi Goïta reposted the video with one sentence, "We move as one." In Guinea, Mamadi Doumbouya followed with, "We stand with Ibrahim." And in the streets of Niger, crowds marched holding signs that read, "Africa bows to no one." This wasn't nationalism. It was unity, not just of governments, but of people. Students, farmers, mothers, elders. Tired of empty promises. Tired of watching their resources drain into foreign hands while their children slept hungry. Foreign media called it a stunt. Western officials stayed silent. But silence speaks volumes, especially when it comes from those used to being obeyed. Inside Africa, something irreversible had begun. Conversations shifted. Young people, once disillusioned, started seeing something else in their reflection: power. Not borrowed. Not begged for. Claimed. Across the Sahel alliance hardened, not just as a military pact, but as a bond of purpose. They began rejecting foreign bases, rewriting trade deals, rebuilding infrastructure to serve their people, not their creditors. And yet, with every step forward came pressure. Sanctions. Threats. Smears. But the difference now? Africa was no longer blinking. Traoré didn't deliver a perfect speech. It wasn't polished or polite. But it was honest. And in a world full of puppets, that kind of truth is dangerous. To those who still see Africa as weak, ask yourself this. What happens when a continent stops asking for respect and starts demanding it? The air was thick. Not just with heat, but with something heavier. Defiance. Fury. Hope. A man stepped up to the podium in Ouagadougou, not with a speech, but with a warning. Not to his people, but to the world. His voice didn't tremble. His eyes didn't flinch. He wasn't just speaking for Burkina Faso, he was speaking for a continent long silenced. This wasn't politics. This was war. A war for dignity, for memory, for a future written by African hands. And what he said next sent shockwaves across Africa. Stay with me, because this story has been buried, and it's time we uncover it. In the heart of West Africa lies a country many barely mention in global headlines: Burkina Faso. Landlocked. Resource-rich. Too often overlooked. But something has been stirring there, not in silence, not in shadows, but out in the open. At the center of it all stands Ibrahim Traoré, a man who didn't rise through handshakes and photo ops, but through fire. When Burkina Faso was bleeding from conflict, corruption, and decades of foreign manipulation, he didn't ask permission. He stepped in, took power, and made it clear, this wasn't about ego. It was about taking back control. At just 34, some called him reckless. Others called him a revolutionary. But the truth? He represents something that terrifies world powers, a young African leader who refuses to bow. Burkina Faso isn't new to foreign interference. Its soil holds the memory of assassinated leaders, military coups, and whispered deals made in Paris and Washington. Gold is mined from its earth, but the profits rarely stay. Foreign bases dot its land, but they don't defend, they control. And the people? For years, they've been told to wait, to be patient, to stay quiet. But under Traoré, the tone has shifted. The wait is over. The silence is done. What pushed him from guarded caution to open defiance? It wasn't just one threat. It was the weight of centuries, and a message he could no longer ignore. Next, we explore the moment that lit the match, and why Traoré chose to speak when others stayed silent. The message didn't arrive through official channels. It leaked, whispered through diplomatic backdoors, then echoed online. A statement, reportedly from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, warning African leaders to stay in line, or face consequences. There were debates over whether he really said it. Analysts dissected the phrasing. Media outlets brushed it aside. But to Ibrahim Traoré, it didn't matter. Because the words, whether real or denied, rang loud and familiar. Stay in line. That wasn't just a political jab. It was a historical echo, the kind shouted at ancestors in chains, muttered by colonizers over land maps, printed in secret agreements that traded African sovereignty for foreign profit. And this time, it was directed at leaders trying to assert independence. Burkina Faso had already made its stance clear. French troops had been ordered out. Foreign mining companies faced scrutiny. The country was pivoting, not toward the east or west, but inward toward itself. Toward Africa. But this message, this thinly veiled threat, wasn't just a warning to Traoré. It was a challenge to everything he stood for. It was a reminder that no matter how much progress was made, some still saw Africa as a chessboard, not a continent of equals, but a playground for power. He could have ignored it. Most leaders would have. Kept the outrage behind closed doors. Maintained diplomatic balance. But Traoré wasn't raised on silence. He was raised on the memory of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso who dared to defy the world and was assassinated for it. The pressure was mounting. Foreign aid was drying up. Threats loomed. Western media was painting him as unstable, dangerous. And yet, the streets of Ouagadougou were alive. Not with fear, but with pride. For the first time in decades, people felt like someone was standing up for them. Not begging, but demanding. So when the cameras rolled and the microphones turned on, there was no speech prepared. No teleprompter. No approval from international advisors. There was only Ibrahim Traoré, and a voice that refused to be silenced. What followed was not a press conference. It was a reckoning.